Nobody had really did anything except for sensationalize the idea of young athletes losing their money. And frankly, you know, when you talk NBA and NFL, which is a lot of money is made in those two sports, it's predominantly young black athletes. So that started to disturb me as I went through my career. So we started thinking about how do we really break this down and get into it. We got to the word kneading dough based off a Jay-Z song and then started to craft the creative idea just around creating a conversation that A, dealt with that, but also empowered people who were listening and watching to feel a part of the conversation and then made it easier for them to express these feelings or these questions that they have and don't know.
High school graduates, straight to the league, I ain't waiting for my knee to blow. Yesterday I was kneading this dough. Get it? I was kneading this dough.
So we are reversing the mics with our guest tonight. Let's start with kneading dough. Where did you come up with the concept for it?
The way finance and athletes was always talked about, to me, became very disturbing. I think because athletes were always put in this box or this position of, I mean, frankly, people calling them stupid, basically. Like they always mess up their money.
Why was that important for you to tell that story to the world?
I wanted to build a place, a platform, a show where athletes could come on and be truthful and honest about what does it actually feel like to be 22 and make $10 million, because there was no place for it. Otherwise, it's always just used as clickbait in a way for media companies to drive clicks and use the athlete instead of empowering them at the same time empowering the audience.
Did you realize how much of an impact the series was going to have when you came up with it?
I don't think we realized it then, but we realized it as we got going. A. B, obviously we wanted it to have big impact, and we wanted it to become not just a show, but a real platform that allows all to come in. We're using athletes at the tip of the spear to tell their story so people can look at them and go, oh, if Draymond or Ben Simmons can discuss this, then I can discuss this too with my friends. And I think Kneading Dough has become one of the flagship brands that we have at Uninterrupted. The same thing with me. Out of all the things we do, the most people come up to me, the thing people come up to me and say the most is thank you for you guys creating Kneading Dough. It was something that I needed, we needed, the community needed, people needed to feel empowered about having conversations around money.
Here on the platform, you've talked to professional athletes from tennis, skiing,
gymnastics,
every kind of professional sport you can imagine. Is there anything on this side of it that you may not have thought or been surprised about when you first started the series?
Draymond and I talked about, he gave me a real interesting perspective. It was, you know, back when the Cavs and the Warriors were playing in the finals, I was going to the games and I was telling him that the tickets are really expensive for the finals, like the most expensive of any finals I had ever been to, and I've been to many finals. And we were just talking as friends, and I was explaining to him, like, I can't believe how much I pay for tickets. And I actually did a little research. I think the Warriors are making like 3 times the amount the Cavs were at the gate for each one of those finals. That year they went 7. And Draymond, because he has that perspective of and why we wanted athletes from all different places, he said to me, you know, Mav, you're so right. He goes, I actually went to the GM of the team and said, this is really screwed up. I'm Draymond. At that time, I think he's making $16 million a year. He goes, it's not so bad for me, but I know what it's like to be a second-round pick, and he pointed to one of their rookies, a second-round pick, because that guy's making $700,000, which is a lot of money, a whole lot of money. But when you cut that in half and it's now $320, and they played 4 finals games, and he needs 5 or 10 tickets, we did the math. He might, if he needed 6 tickets or 10 tickets, he could have spent 10 to 15% of his salary on just those 4 games for tickets. My point is, we wanted athletes on Kneading Dough who had, that's a perspective LeBron James doesn't have, right? He's never been that guy. He doesn't know what it means to be a second-round pick and hoping you make the team, and you make the team, and you're making hundreds of thousands instead of millions. So we always wanted this show to have, we've had Simone Biles from gymnastics. We wanted to have a range of athletes so we could get those little bits and understandings. We wanted a tennis player, because tennis is not a team sport. So when you win in tennis, you get paid. You go get the check, and that's it. It's not like that in football or basketball.
Right. So if you look at the landscape of sports, and even in society in general, empowerment and, that education and changing the narrative is now becoming the norm. And athletes doing everything they're doing off the field and being well-rounded civilians is normal. But when you first started doing it, you were the only one beating on that drum. And I want to try to get down to like where that mindset comes from. Because an aptronym is when somebody's name almost perfectly describes who they are as a person or what their occupation is or their character. And everything you do, and Maverick by definition is someone who's a trailblazer or, an independent-minded thinker who does things their own way. The more I'm around you, it seriously blows my mind that that's your birth name. So we'll start from the beginning. Who named you Maverick?
One of two things. People don't believe it's my real name, but it's the only one I got. And then people who are older than me who remember the show from the 60s asked me, is it my last name? Because I'm named after a TV show that was called Maverick. And my grandmother loved that show. On the show, the character was played by James Gardner. He was a cowboy who went kind of town to town, always kind of saving the town. And he was a world-class poker player and card player. And then Maverick is kind of synonymous with cards and poker. And that was my grandmother's business. She ran after hours where people could come and play poker, pity pat, and shoot craps in her basement. And she'd take a cut of the game and sell food. And literally when my mom went to labor with me, my grandmother left a poker game to come to the hospital. So she's the one who gave me the name Maverick. And I also think she's the one that most helped me define me, just through her spirit of who she was. And she kind of put that in me and gave me the name too.
So she has like the gambler mentality, risk taker.
100%.
And that's where you get it from.
100%.
Like to me, I'm the complete opposite. I want to control all the variables.
My grandmother had a great line. She always said, if you got a hunch, bet a bunch.
I mean, you are a risk taker, and your ability to take the risk and then not even consider the what ifs is kind of what makes you special. So growing up in Akron, what was your financial situation like?
As a little kid, we lived in a low-income neighborhood, but I grew up happy and feeling good and never wanting food. But we lived in back then I didn't know, so I thought I had everything. I felt like it at least. And when before my dad went to jail, we had a little bit of money. We were hood rich, right? Because my dad sold drugs. And then when he went to jail, things changed drastically. I'll never forget that basketball season when I got ready, football season, then it was time to go into basketball season. And my mom pulled up and didn't have the Jordans for me for that year. I was like, what's going on? What happened? But it definitely taught me that there are ups and downs in life, and you gotta ride them. My dad went away. My mom worked her job for 29 years. She was a social worker for the county that we lived in. And she made enough that I never wanted for clothes or food. We had lights and things on, but there was no extra. There was nothing extra. And talking about finances and money, we never, ever discussed it in my house. It just never.
Really?
The only thing we would discuss with money is we were short on money.
We ain't got it.
We ain't got it. And in fact, just until 2 days ago was the first time I ever, still now, asked my mom, how much money did she make when she was working? I had never asked her.
That's amazing.
It was just a thing that we just never talked about.
Okay, so as quiet as it's kept, you have a more than an athlete story. And it's not like an adjacent story. You were a Division I basketball player. When did it click for you then that you felt like you had what it took to take basketball to the next level as an athlete?
I've been playing sports forever and really kind of dedicating my life to playing basketball. I played basketball in high school, had a decent career, and realized that I could play on a level at least to play in college. That's when my aspiration became less of a dream and more of like confirmation that I could play Division I basketball, which I went on to do.
So how did you make the decision to go to Western Michigan?
I wanted to go to a place where I could go in right away and play. I didn't want to sit on the bench, even though I was a freshman. I wanted to go with coaches I thought and believed would give me a shot to really play my freshman year, which I did. I ended up starting a few games my freshman year.
You're at a Division I basketball, so you're a starter. You start as a freshman and you make the decision to take another path. How did that decision come about?
I met a gentleman named Lynn Merritt, who's still one of my mentors and one of the people who deserve more credit for my career than just about anyone. And he told me he worked at Nike. And it was a little bit like I had always dreamed of owning a pair of Nikes and getting the new Nikes, and I always wanted them. But I never thought about there's people who work there and make all this happen. So when I met him, right away, that thing that my dad has kicked in. It just went into overdrive where I just started asking question after question after question, genuine, legit questions about the process at Nike and how do they decide who, they're going to endorse and where their product and who designs the sneakers and the marketing and question after question. And because of that, he took a liking to my curiosity and my thirst for knowledge, and he offered me an internship. And I realized at that moment that I thought I liked Nike because of the sneakers and because of the athletes, but I realized what I loved about Nike, I never even thought about that because it wasn't a thing that I thought about at the time, was their ability to storytell with athletes, the stories and the way that they articulated who the athletes are and the authenticity of the athletes, and that's what led you to buy the product. And at that moment, I realized, wow, that's a job too. And I realized, I could go back to college, keep playing. At that moment, I'm like, I'm almost certain I'm not gonna be an NBA player. I might as well get my career started now, so if I could get a job here, then that's what I'm gonna do. And they offered me a consultancy. And then when LeBron turned pro, he was like, you have the information, you spent the time, you've been to Nike, you've been inside, I'm gonna sign with Nike, I want you to go work there. I've already worked it out for them to hire you.
Was it you or LeBron that said, hey, I want you to go over all of my business from here on out?
His idea and feeling of really, truly empowering people is where I get that from, and truly embodying that feeling of giving someone a chance who you believe in and trust,
right?
And they're gonna do the job with the level that you need it done. I get that from him, and he did that for me.
Were you nervous?
Absolutely nervous. But the thing I set out to do, much like when you think about a sport, like if they gave me the job to be the head coach of the New York Giants tomorrow, which they could because the Giants are playing horrible.
They'd probably be in a better situation.
Yeah. I would be very nervous. I would do it, but I'd be very nervous. But I'd instantly do what I did when I got that job. I surround myself with amazing minds and thinkers who are specialists, who know what they know. Get those people in the room and start talking about how this is we all have one mission, which was to really help LeBron and make sure he was set up to be successful in everything that he wanted to do. So we had to be a team and then turn it over kind of to them and just sit there and listen and be a sponge and soak it up and then put all that together. But I was learning from all the experts that worked with us.
You're managing the biggest basketball player ever. Do you remember your first big check and what did you do with it?
Yeah, LeBron had started to keep his cardio going, his legs. He started riding a bike. So I started doing it. We did this thing. My dad would go with us. Randy, LeBron's chief of staff, would go with us. And we'd ride bikes in the Metro Park. And there's a trail. And some days we started off doing like 10 miles. We worked it up to we were doing like 40 miles. And through that, I started to think about two things. A, the fact that cross-training as a sport it's not really a sport, but the idea of cross-training for all athletes is important, as all athletes kind of train in different ways. But if you think about a basketball player or a tennis player, anyone who kind of bangs their legs around in their sport, and in basketball especially because you're playing on a hard surface, hard wood, getting on a bike to keep your cardio up in your legs while also saving your knees and hips is a beautiful story to tell for marketing. So I started to think about how do we translate LeBron's love of bike riding to a marketing story to then become a business. So my first idea was we should buy an old bike company and try and revamp it. The one I wanted to buy was Schwinn. So I called the guy who did our deals at the time, still does to this day, and told him this idea that I wanted to put together a group of investors and include some athletes. Go buy a bike. I want to go buy Schwinn specifically because it was a brand everyone knew. Buy that brand and then use the athletes as a marketing story. They use bikes to cross-train to really bring the brand back. He called me up a couple days later and said, we're not going to do Schwinn, but I think I found the idea. You got to fly to New York and meet with a guy who owns this bike company called Cannondale, which I had never heard of at the time, but I flew up here, met with the guy. It was the first time I learned about private equity. The guy ran a private equity firm. I didn't even know what that was.
Right.
And he was open to making a deal with us. And we made the deal for LeBron to purchase a piece of the company. And LeBron, again, just being a guy who's empowering and goes for it, didn't take money from the company. He wrote a check to the company to purchase a piece. And then LeBron got some more equity for giving his name, likeness, and image to it. And then the guy taught me what sweat equity was. He says, I'm going to give you some of it, Mav, a little piece of the equity for the work, because you're going to have to do this work. He's like, I don't know how to do this marketing, storytelling thing you're talking about. And I knew it a bit from working at Nike. I was just taking my skills I learned at Nike and applying them to a different category. I wasn't reinventing the wheel. And we did it, brought on a couple athletes, a tennis player, and got going, got traction. That's when LeBron started this bike event that he did in Akron every year called the Bike Event. I started riding a bike pretty avidly. And then a year and a half later, the guy called me up one day and says, we're going to sell Cannondale for a big profit. You guys are going to do fantastic. And we sold the company to a big company called Doral Industries. And LeBron made 3.5 or 4 times his money, and I got a check. It's the first time I had ever got a real check. I was like, I think I got like $75,000 or close to $100,000. I couldn't believe it. I was like, first off, it was the money, obviously, but more than the money, it was like that idea worked.
Right.
Like the thing I thought about, it contributed, it worked. We had the idea, we executed, we found the right partner. And I learned a lot going through that. It's funny, on LeBron's desk in his office in Ohio, he has a plaque. Amongst all of his plaques, 4 MVPs, rings, he has a plaque from some business group that's like a crystal plaque that says Cannondale, the turnaround of the year. Like because he was one of the owners,
right.
And they turned the business around in a year and a half, and it won at this business awards and won the turnaround of the year award. So it's a cool award when you think about more than an athlete, and he got that back in 2006.
So was that a moment for you to make it click? Like, oh, I have the formula, and I know I can do this.
100%.
Did you feel prepared when the money came? Because you talk about always athletes getting money and not being prepared. How prepared did you feel to manage it, and how'd you figure out how to navigate the water?
I was totally unprepared because I had nobody to lean on or rely on to prepare me for it. More importantly, what I wanted to start thinking about was, how do I keep doing it? How do I build this into something, right. A? And B, personally, I was not prepared for the money at all, and definitely blew it all on, some car I was dreaming about, right. For sure. But again, to my point of this show, as an executive, that was, for me, I was like, I want to make this just the beginning. I want to get better, more experienced at my job, so I could keep doing this and build this into something that really becomes a value. I had always come from, everybody I knew had just had a job, and you worked that job, and you got a paycheck every 2 weeks. But this was something we held, and it was valuable, and you didn't get paid for it every 2 weeks, but you held it because it was valuable, and later you traded that for cash. So that idea of what is value and how do you find value in things is what I really learned going through that. I definitely was not prepared for the money.
What is the best financial advice, if you had to pick one thing to give to an athlete? If they come to you and say, Mav, hey, this is what's going on, what do you think? What is the advice you always give?
Don't put all the emphasis on just making money. Put all the emphasis on building value, building real value that is A, sustainable, and B, can become a platform for you. So I always talk anybody, but specifically athletes, about, okay, what is your platform? If you play soccer or tennis or basketball, that sport is your platform. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that platform is solid and a foundation, because then you can build other things on top of it. And those things, you have to pick the lane that you care about, like you like media. So you started to become a broadcast and an analyst, and now you can work as an executive. But without being a football player, that would have been very hard for you to do, right? And we all, in life, everyone needs a platform. If you work at ESPN, ESPN becomes your platform. If you work at Chase, Chase becomes your platform. If you, wherever you work at or what you do or wherever you work at becomes your platform, and whatever that main platform is, before you start quickly doing other things, you gotta make sure that thing is solid.
Is it hard to splurge on yourself?
No.
No. What's the one thing you always splurge on?
It's a bad habit, but if I sit down for dinner and I've had a long day, I've never have a problem buying a great bottle of wine, because it really brings people together. It encourages, you know, as we all know, the conversations get much better the more wine you have. So I'm always willing to buy a great bottle of wine, always, every single time.
In order to keep extra money in your pocket, what's one broke habit that you've always kept?
Since I was a kid, like the idea of like having money or having things that have value, but you can't see them. They're not like, you know, where we come from, everybody only is like money. You need to have actual money. It's hand to hand. So not even as a broke habit, but just as a way to make, so that I'm always comfortable. Even though I'll go days, weeks without spending actual bills, usually, I always have a couple $100 in my pocket just to feel comfortable. Because I just like, I get it, you have money and this thing's worth that and that, but like, I just like to, you know, I come from a place where you always need to have money because you never know what was gonna happen or take place.
When it's all said and done, what do you want to be known for?
I'd like to be known for a guy who worked at a company, helped to build a company that really empowered a generation of people to feel like they too can be more than. That's exactly what I want to be known for.
That's incredible. Give it up for Mav Carter, everybody.
Thank you.